You are listening to Sales Optex. Visit us at salesoptex.com.
I want you to take a second right now and think about the most critical spreadsheet you manage.
Oh, yeah. Every single person listening has one of those.
Right. Like you're sitting in your sales operations role right now, and I know for an absolute fact, you know exactly the file I'm talking about.
Yep. It's always open on a second monitor.
Exactly. It's the one that tracks the entire global pipeline, or maybe it's the one that calculates the quarterly commissions for your entire sales floor.
The one with like 42 hidden tabs?
Yes. The one with 42 hidden tabs and all those terrifying VO cups that reference external files on some random shared drive.
And if you move one of those external files, the whole thing just completely breaks.
It totally breaks.
Yeah.
It's the file you use to project the end-of-year revenue that the executive team literally takes to the board.
It's a lot of pressure.
It's a massive amount of pressure. So picture that file. Think about the sheer weight of your entire company resting on those, little green grid lines.
It's honestly a terrifying thought when you really pause and look at it.
It is. Now, I want you to imagine what would happen if a single tiny broken formula just hidden on, row 4000 of that file just cost your company millions of dollars.
Which happens way more often than anyone wants to admit.
Right. Or worse, what if you confidently walked into a board meeting, you handed out your printed reports, and the numbers you pulled from that spreadsheet completely contradicted the official CRM dashboard playing on the projector behind you?
Oh, man. The dreaded data mismatch.
Yeah, and everyone in the room just turns and stares at you.
It is a universally terrifying scenario. I mean, it's the stuff of literal nightmares for operators.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reality is, it's playing out right now in boardrooms all over the world. We build up this grand illusion that enterprise data is this, fortified, highly engineered, impregnable structure.
Like a digital fortress.
Exactly, a digital fortress. But so often, when you actually pull back the curtain on a multi-million-dollar operation, the entire revenue engine is being held together by a wildly fragile web of copy-pasted cells.
Just sitting on someone's local hard drive.
Yes, just sitting on a hard drive, completely unguarded.
Which brings us to the mission as our deep dive today. We are unpacking a massive and frankly anxiety-inducing stack of sources.
It's a heavy stack today.
It really is. We're pulling from the Corporate Finance Institute. We've got comprehensive risk management frameworks from Mitra Tech and Risk Connect, and a deeply unsettling database of historical spreadsheet disasters.
Yeah, those case studies from Caspio and the European Spreadsheet Risk and Interest Group, or USPRIG, are just wild.
They really are. So our goal today is to explore a concept called the Excel feedback loop.
Which is such a crucial concept to understand.
Right. We're going to uncover why a staggering 88% of all spreadsheets contain fundamental errors.
88%. It's just a mind-blowing statistic.
It is. But more importantly, we're going to look at this specifically through the lens of sales operations.
Because that's where the pain is really felt.
Yeah. We want to prove that running an enterprise on spreadsheets is actually not a technology problem at all. It is a fundamental failure of leadership and strategic accountability.
That is the core argument, yes. It's a leadership failure.
So I want to start by unpacking this Excel feedback loop, because the journey of data in a modern company is fascinating. And it usually starts with the best of intentions, right?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone starts out wanting a clean system.
Right. A company will spend millions of dollars, thousands of hours building the perfect data pipeline.
Yeah.
They scrub the legacy data. They align all of the departmental definitions.
So that marketing and sales finally agree on what a lead actually is.
Yes, which is a miracle in itself. They invest in a top-tier CRM or ERP system, and they build these beautiful, trusted, dynamic dashboards.
And that right there, that is the dream of the single source of truth.
The holy grail of data.
Exactly. The executives log in, they see a chart, and for a brief, shining moment, the entire company has absolute alignment on the state of the business.
But then it all falls apart.
It always does.
And it falls apart the exact millisecond a user clicks a little gray button in the corner of that dashboard that says export to CSV or export to Excel.
That click is literally the sound of your data governance shattering into a million pieces.
Wow. Just from an export button.
Yeah, because we have to look at the psychology of the export, right? Why does a sales ops professional export that data in the first place?
Usually because they're in a hurry.
Exactly. They almost never do it with malicious intent. They're usually sitting there thinking, I just need to slice this regional data a little differently for my VP's afternoon presentation.
Or they want to add a quick custom calculation for some new incentive program that the CRM dashboard simply doesn't support yet.
Right. And to be fair to the operator, they aren't wrong in that specific moment. Excel is incredibly fast. It's flexible.
It's the job done right then and there.
It does, but that speed is the trap. The moment that data leaves the governed, audited system, it forks.
It basically becomes a parallel universe, a totally alternate reality.
It really does. It becomes a completely ungoverned, unvalidated new version of the truth. You no longer have a single source of truth.
You have the system's truth, and you have the spreadsheet's truth.
Exactly. And they are rarely identical for very long.
I want to translate this to a highly specific, real-world sales ops scenario. Let's picture a senior sales ops manager.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. They are pulling raw pipeline data from the CRM into Excel because they need to manually adjust the weighting of a few massive strategic enterprise deals.
Happens every end of quarter.
Yep. So the CRM logic automatically weights deals at 50% if they're in the proposal stage. But the ops manager knows the CEO just had dinner with the prospect.
Ah, the executive override.
Exactly. So they're going to manually change the weighting to 90% in their spreadsheet just to reflect reality. They make the tweaks, they save the file, and they email it to the VP of sales.
A perfectly normal Tuesday in sales ops.
Right. So the VP of sales gets it, opens it, and then forwards it to a regional director.
And the chain begins.
Yes. The regional director looks at it and thinks, well, my specific region looks a little light for this quarter. So they filter the data differently. They hide a few rows of deals that they think are dead.
Classic move.
And then they add their own custom column for commit versus upside. They save it to their desktop as pipeline_v2_final, and they email it to their team.
And let me guess, in the span of 4 hours, we now have 3 completely different, conflicting versions of the company's pipeline floating around in email attachments.
Exactly. And absolutely none of them tie back to the original dashboard.
And then the end of the quarter arrives, the critical reconciliation meetings begin.
The most stressful meetings of the year.
Oh, absolutely. Suddenly, you have highly paid executives spending hours and hours arguing over whose spreadsheet is accurate instead of actually analyzing the data to make strategic business decisions.
Right. The meeting just devolves.
The meeting becomes an audit of the files rather than a strategy session for the company.
Okay, I am going to push back on this pretty hard, though. Let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, go for it.
You and I both know that enterprise CRMs can be incredibly rigid.
They can be, yes.
I mean, they take months to configure. And getting IT to add a new custom field requires a ticketing process that moves at a glacial pace.
It can definitely feel that way to an operator.
Right. So if a VP of sales demands a pivot table analyzing a brand new market segment in 10 minutes before a board call, I'm doing it. I am exporting that data and building the pivot table.
You have to, right? Or you look bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I tell them, oh, no, I can't do that because of data governance, I'm going to get fired. The reality of modern business operations is speed. So why is exporting it to Excel so inherently dangerous if it solves an immediate critical problem?
I completely understand that pressure, and it is a very real dynamic in sales operations. You're trying to survive the day.
Right. I just need to get the VP the numbers.
But here's why giving into that pressure and prioritizing speed via spreadsheets is a toxic trap for an organization over the long term.
Okay, why?
When you repeatedly rely on exported, localized spreadsheets to answer critical questions, you force a massive, invisible cultural shift.
A cultural shift. How so?
The organization slowly stops asking, what does our data actually say? And they start asking, which version of the spreadsheet are we choosing to believe today?
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying distinction. You move from seeking objective reality to just seeking a consensus on an artifact.
Exactly. It changes the entire paradigm of corporate decision-making. It creates a culture that actively rewards speed and presentation over structural accuracy.
So whoever makes the prettiest chart wins the argument.
Pretty much. The person who can export, pivot, and chart the fastest is the one who gets their narrative in front of the executives. But in the background, this completely destroys institutional trust in the official analytics.
Because the numbers never match.
Right. Because eventually, a board member or an executive looks at the pristine CRM dashboard, compares it to the hastily built spreadsheet that the VP is presenting, and says, these numbers don't match, the dashboard must be broken.
Oh, I've heard that exact sentence so many times.
Even though the dashboard is the only thing that actually follows the agreed-upon audited business logic.
So the multi-million-dollar tool that was designed to give us absolute clarity ends up creating what the sources literally refer to as a guessing engine.
A guessing engine. It's the perfect term for it.
You aren't running a data-driven organization anymore. You're running a guessing engine fueled by localized files.
And that leads us directly into how this happens on a systemic structural level. Research firms like Gartner actually have a term for this phenomenon.
What do they call it?
They refer to it as shadow IT.
Shadow IT. Okay, for someone who isn't a systems architect, what does that actually mean? Honestly, I always picture hackers in hoodies when I hear that, not like Brenda in accounting or Gary in sales ops.
Yeah, it sounds very nefarious, but it really just means any software, system, or application built and used inside a company without formal IT governance testing or approval.
Okay, so it's just off-the-books software.
Exactly. And Excel is without a doubt the world's largest, most pervasive shadow IT system.
It's everywhere.
It feels entirely safe and controlled because it's so incredibly familiar. We all grew up using it. It's on literally every computer.
Right. It doesn't feel like shadow IT. It feels like basic office work.
But in an enterprise environment, a complex spreadsheet is essentially a custom software application that is completely decentralized, totally unmonitored, and wildly inconsistent.
And the sources make a really strong, almost combative point here. They state unequivocally that no organization accidentally ends up running their core operations on Excel.
It is never an accident.
Right. It doesn't just happen to you like a sudden rainstorm. It happened through deliberate, conscious leadership decisions and, frankly, a series of compromises.
That is the core argument we have to explore deeply today. If your core business logic, how you calculate revenue, how you assign quotas, how you determine payouts live solely in spreadsheets, your corporate architecture doesn't actually exist.
It's a mirage.
It is. The sources break down 4 specific, identifiable leadership failures that lead directly to this massive spreadsheet dependency.
Let's dive into those failures. The first one they identify is the "this works for now" mentality.
Oh, this is the most common entry point for disaster. It is the classic scenario where a temporary duct tape solution slowly morphs into a permanent load-bearing system.
Okay, give me an example of how that starts.
Sure. Imagine a sales ops team needs a way to track a brand new SPF.
Right, like a temporary short-term sales incentive program to push a new product.
Exactly. They don't want to overhaul the CRM for a 2-week promotion, right? So they build a quick, clever spreadsheet to track the bonuses.
Makes total sense in the moment.
But then the promotion is so successful that the SPF becomes a permanent fixture of the compensation structure. 3 years later, the entire global commission payout for a $100 million division is still being run out of that temporary file that someone built over a weekend.
I have seen that exact scenario play out more times than I can count. It's terrifying.
It's everywhere.
So the second leadership failure, the sources point out, is actively avoiding investment in proper infrastructure.
Because building real, robust data systems like implementing proper sales performance management software or hiring dedicated developers requires significant time, money, and expertise.
It's a big line item on a budget.
It is. So leadership looks at the quarterly budget, they look at the cost of the software license, and they decide to kick the can down the road. They say, let's just hold off on that upgrade for another fiscal year. The sales ops team is smart. They can just handle the territory mapping in Excel for now.
Which shifts the entire burden of enterprise architecture onto the shoulders of operators who aren't software developers. They're ops people.
Exactly. You're asking business analysts to be systems engineers.
And that leads into the third leadership failure, which is a fundamental lack of technical understanding at the executive level.
This is huge. If the executive leadership team doesn't fundamentally understand data pipelines, relational databases, system architecture, or the principles of data governance, they will always default to what they personally know.
Which is usually Excel.
Yep. When a complex, multi-layered data problem arises in a meeting, their immediate answer is, just put it in a spreadsheet and send it to me. They don't realize that by asking for that, they're forcing their operations team to build a skyscraper out of toothpicks.
A skyscraper out of toothpicks. That is such a good way to put it. And the final leadership failure, the sources highlight, is an environment with no true ownership of data.
When everyone owns a small, fragmented piece of the spreadsheet, when different regional teams are all inputting data into shared tabs, adding their own columns, altering formulas to fit their local currency, it means nobody actually owns the system as a whole.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Way too many. There's no central accountable authority ensuring the integrity of the logic. It is a communal garden where everyone is planting different seeds and wondering why it's a jungle.
I'm trying to visualize the scale of this risk, right? Relying on Excel for enterprise operations is essentially like a city deciding not to build a permanent engineered steel bridge across a river because a temporary wooden plank works for now.
I love that analogy.
Right. The plank gets people across, but then, because the plank is there and it hasn't broken yet, they decide to start driving 18-wheelers over it. And everyone in the city government is just crossing their fingers, hoping that the wood holds up for one more day.
That is a phenomenal analogy. And if we bring that back to our listener in sales operations, those 18-wheelers driving over the wooden plank are the actual revenue engines of the company.
The quotas, the payouts, the pipeline.
Yes. When leadership continually refuses to invest in proper, governed software systems, the operations team is forced to literally duct tape the revenue engine together. And this environment breeds a highly specific, incredibly dangerous byproduct.
Oh, are we talking about key person dependency?
We are.
Oh, you mean the spreadsheet whisperer.
Every organization has one. You get one brilliant, highly analytical person on the ops team who built the massive, interconnected 40-tab financial model.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly who you mean.
They are the only human being on Earth who understands the labyrinth of macros, the nested VLOOKUPs, the hidden reference tables, and the cascading logic.
They're a genius, honestly.
They are. But if that person leaves the company for a better job, or goes on a 2-week vacation to a place without cell service, or heaven forbid, just gets sick, the entire revenue reporting function of a multinational corporation grinds to a complete halt.
The company's entire financial visibility is entirely dependent on one human being's biological memory of how a file works.
Yes, and I cannot stress this enough. That is not a technology problem. Microsoft Excel is functioning exactly as it was designed to.
Right, it's doing what it's told.
Exactly.
Right.
The existence of the spreadsheet whisperer is a massive, glaring failure of strategic risk management by the executive leadership team.
Okay, so if leadership thinks the wooden plank is safe enough because it hasn't visibly snapped yet, we really need to look at what actually happens when the 18-wheeler finally breaks it. Because it absolutely does break.
Oh, it breaks spectacularly.
I want to transition into some truly terrifying statistics provided by the Corporate Finance Institute. They conducted extensive research and concluded that 88% of all spreadsheets contain fundamental errors.
88%. Think about the gravity of that number.
It's hard to even wrap my head around.
If a commercial airline model had an 88% chance of experiencing a critical mechanical failure, the entire global aviation industry would be shut down overnight. No one would ever set foot on a plane.
Never. We wouldn't tolerate it for a second.
Yet we run global financial markets, national healthcare systems, and Fortune 500 supply chains on files that have an 88% failure rate.
It is staggering when you frame it like that. And our sources from Caspio and the European Spreadsheet Risk Interest Group have painstakingly curated a database of what happens when those inevitable errors finally go live in the real world.
The real-world consequences are shocking.
Let's dig into the mechanics of these disasters. I want to look at the most common and perhaps the most deceptively devastating category, the copy-paste catastrophe.
Copy and paste. It is arguably the simplest, most foundational function on a modern computer. You highlight, you hit Control-C, you move, you hit Control-V.
I do it 100 times a day.
We all do. And yet that mechanical action has caused literally billions of dollars in vanished wealth.
Billions.
Yes. Let's examine the infamous JP Morgan Chase disaster. In May of 2012, they suffered a trading loss of approximately $6.5 billion.
Let me just pause right there. Billion, with a B, over a spreadsheet. How is that physically possible? What were they even trying to calculate?
They were using Excel to create something called value-at-risk models, or VAR models.
Okay, for the listener who isn't deep into high finance, what does that mean?
A value-at-risk model is an incredibly complex statistical framework used to measure and quantify the level of financial risk within a firm over a specific time frame. It is supposed to tell the bank, in the absolute worst-case scenario, here is how much money we could lose today.
So it's basically an alarm system for investments.
Right. JP Morgan was using these models to assess a massive synthetic credit portfolio, essentially a highly complex bundle of credit derivatives.
So they are trying to measure the risk of incredibly complex, volatile financial instruments, and they are doing it in Excel.
Yes. And the mechanism of the failure is almost heartbreakingly simple. A finance employee was tasked with manually moving data from one analytical spreadsheet to another to run the final calculations.
Oh no, I can see where this is going.
They highlighted the cells, copied the information, and pasted it into the new model, but they pasted the wrong information into the wrong location, and the pre-existing formulas within the destination cells were not adjusted to accommodate the new data structure.
Wait, I'm trying to understand the specific math error here. Did it just drop a number entirely? Did it shift a row?
A subsequent internal task force report revealed the specific mathematical tragedy. The spreadsheet was designed to calculate an average of certain volatility rates. But because of the copy-paste error and the misaligned formulas, instead of averaging the rates by dividing by the number of inputs, the spreadsheet was dividing the rates by their sum.
Oh wow, so what did that actually do to the numbers?
Mathematically, it muted the calculated volatility by a factor of 2. It completely artificially suppressed the true risk of the portfolio.
So the bank thought they were playing it safe, but the spreadsheet was essentially lying to them. It was telling them a raging fire was just a mild, warm breeze.
Exactly. It gave them a false sense of security on a massive scale.
But how does a $6.5 billion error not get caught by someone else? Where were the safety nets? I mean, it's JP Morgan.
That is where we return to the leadership failure aspect. There was no systemic peer review of the spreadsheet logic, no automated testing of the calculations, and no version control. It was a manual, human, copy-paste error wrapped in a total lack of institutional governance.
And it's not just Wall Street banking. Let's look at the TransAlta case. They are a massive power generator.
Right, a Canadian energy company.
Yeah, they lost $24 million on power transmission hedging. And the mechanism here wasn't even a complex formula error. It was a literal cut-and-paste mistake involving mismatched bids in an Excel file.
Just a basic sorting error.
Yes. The CEO of TransAlta literally had to get on a conference call and admit to furious shareholders that a simple Excel sorting and pasting error cost them $24 million. Why? Because the market regulations didn't allow for reversal of the bids once they were submitted, regardless of whether it was a typo.
If we translate the mechanics of that sorting error directly to the listener sitting in a sales operations role right now, it is a chilling scenario.
Okay, let's play that out. What does that look like?
Imagine you are executing a massive global territory alignment for the new fiscal year. You have a spreadsheet with hundreds of sales reps and thousands of high-value accounts.
Standard ops project.
Right. You need to sort the spreadsheet alphabetically by region to align the new assignments. But in your haste, you accidentally highlight only columns A through M before you apply the sort, completely missing columns N through Z.
Oh, no. I physically recoiled hearing that. I've almost done that myself.
Most of us have. You just scrambled the underlying architecture of your entire company's account ownership. The names sorted, but the account IDs stayed in place.
So Bob in Ohio is suddenly assigned to enterprise accounts in Tokyo.
Exactly. You then copy-paste that corrupted data block directly into the CRM data loader. Suddenly, enterprise reps are seeing mid-market accounts they shouldn't have access to, pipelines are crossed, sensitive compensation data is visible to the wrong managers.
And the damage to the sales floor's trust and momentum is absolute chaos.
Complete chaos. And it all stems from highlighting an inch too far to the left.
Just because of a bad sort and paste. It's terrifying. Let's explore the next category of disaster from the sources. The single-character disaster.
These are the ones that are almost impossible to catch manually.
This is the category that truly keeps me up at night, because it demonstrates how fragile the system is. Let's talk about the Fidelity Investments Magellan Fund.
This is a foundational case study from 1994, but the mechanics of the error are completely timeless.
Okay, set it up for us.
The Fidelity Magellan Fund estimated that they would make a $4.32 per share dividend distribution at the end of the year, which amounted to promising a massive, highly anticipated payout to their shareholders.
So they set a massive expectation.
Right. But in January of 1995, they had to abruptly and publicly cancel the dividend entirely.
Because an employee forgot a single horizontal line, a minus sign. Explain to me how a minus sign cancels a multi-billion-dollar dividend.
A tax accountant at Fidelity was manually transcribing financial records from one system to a separate spreadsheet designed for additional tax calculations. The accountant was entering a net capital loss of $1.3 billion.
Okay, entering a loss.
But during the data entry, they simply forgot to type the minus sign in front of the number.
So the software just blindly accepted it as a positive integer.
Precisely. Because the minus sign was missing, the spreadsheet logic treated that $1.3 billion loss as a $1.3 billion net capital gain.
A completely reversed reality.
And the math cascaded through the rest of the sheet. It threw off the entire final dividend estimate by a staggering $2.6 billion swing.
One single keystroke on a numeric pad. That is wild. And let's look at Eastman Kodak. They overstated their severance payments by $11 million.
Another data entry tragedy.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
An employee simply added too many zeros to a single employee's termination record during data entry. Just leaned on the zero key a little too long.
And here is the critical architectural difference between a spreadsheet and a governed software application.
Okay, let's break that down.
If you build a custom HR application, you can program boundary logic into the input fields. You can tell the software if a user tries to enter a severance payment greater than $500,000, throw a massive red error flag and require managerial approval.
Right. The system actively protects itself.
But a spreadsheet cell has no inherent context. It doesn't know what a severance payment is. It is just an empty bucket waiting for a number.
It just accepts whatever you type.
Exactly. The system didn't flag the extra zeros as anomalous. It just blindly, obediently calculated the new, absurdly high total.
If we bring that into the sales ops world, think about processing commission clawbacks.
Oh, that's a perfect parallel.
A rep closes a deal, they get paid, but then the customer churns 3 months later, and you have to claw back that commission from their next paycheck. If you're managing this in a master commission spreadsheet and you miss the minus sign when entering the clawback amount, you don't deduct the money from their check.
You accidentally pay them that massive amount again.
Exactly. You artificially inflate the company's projected quarterly expenses, and you create a nightmare scenario for the rep when you eventually catch the error and have to demand the money back months later. There is no sanity check logic in a standalone cell.
It is entirely reliant on human perfection. And then there is the category the sources call missing links and formula fails. Emerson Electric provides a perfect, painful example of this.
Emerson is a massive, highly sophisticated Fortune 500 company. They were estimating the total cost for a major strategic contract bid.
A very standard corporate exercise.
But when the dust settled, they realized they came up short by $3.7 million. And the mechanism here wasn't a typo. It was a failure of the formula range.
Exactly. The spreadsheet had a master SUM formula designed to total up all the various project expenses, labor, materials, logistics. But the specific cell that contained the entire estimated cost of the electrical work was physically located just outside the range captured by the SUM formula.
It was literally one row too low.
One row down. The formula summed up everything perfectly, completely ignoring the millions of dollars in electrical costs. They submitted the bid based on that flawed total, won the contract, and instantly lost millions of dollars because the spreadsheet's logic was physically detached from the data.
Just a tiny formatting slip. And look at TIBCO Software. They were being bought out by Vista Equity Partners, and their shareholders ended up losing $100 million in the acquisition.
Goldman Sachs was involved in that one, right?
Yes, Goldman Sachs was advising TIBCO and used a custom Excel spreadsheet to calculate TIBCO's implied equity value. A formula error in the sheet accidentally double-counted a specific block of restricted stock.
A double count. Wow.
It completely overstated the outstanding equity value, meaning the share price was calculated incorrectly, and the shareholders got $100 million less than they rightfully should have in the buyout.
What is absolutely vital for the listener to internalize here is that these aren't just silly, careless mistakes made by interns.
Right.
These are highly intelligent, highly trained, highly compensated financial professionals operating at the absolute pinnacle of global finance at Goldman Sachs, at JP Morgan, at Fidelity.
The smartest people in the room are making these mistakes.
Because the core issue is not a lack of intelligence or diligence. The issue is biological.
Illogical.
Yes, the human brain is simply not physically designed to manually audit thousands of interacting microscopic data cells on a backlit screen.
You just can't see the errors after a while.
Exactly. When you choose to use Excel as a production data pipeline for your enterprise, you are betting the entire financial health of your company on absolute, unwavering human perfection 100% of the time. And mathematically, that is a bet you will eventually inevitably lose.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about human fallibility, the copy-paste disasters, the missing minus signs, or the dragging of a formula range. But our sources point out something even more insidious.
Which is?
They argue that even if your human operators are absolute perfectionists who never make a typo, The spreadsheet software itself has systemic architectural vulnerabilities that make it totally unfit for enterprise
Oh,
operations.
absolutely. The software itself has limits.
Moving beyond human error, we have to talk about how the inherent architecture of spreadsheets just physically breaks down at scale. Let's call this the anatomy of the Frankensheet.
The Frankensheet. It is the perfect terminology.
It really is.
It describes a file that has been stitched together over years, patched with disparate data sources, and mutated far beyond its original design parameters until it becomes a monstrous, ungovernable entity. And the first inherent systemic vulnerability of a Frankensheet is its physical capacity and hard scaling limits.
This brings us to a case study that goes way beyond financial loss. It is arguably the most tragic spreadsheet architectural failure in recent history, the Public Health England COVID-19 disaster.
This occurred in the fall of 2020, during the height of the global pandemic. Nearly 16,000 positive COVID-19 case records were completely, silently lost from the UK's national contact tracing system for an entire critical week.
Lost. I need to understand the mechanism here. How does a national health database just misplace 16,000 positive cases during a global crisis?
It happened because of a legacy file format limitation colliding with an automated process. The commercial testing labs were processing the swabs and sending their results back to the government in standard CSV files, which are incredibly simple, lightweight text lists of data.
Okay, pretty standard.
But Public Health England had established an automated software process to pull all this raw CSV data into Excel templates so it could be formatted and uploaded to a central government dashboard.
Okay, so far that sounds like a fairly standard data pipeline. Where did the architecture fail?
The developers who built the automated process selected the old legacy XLS file format for the templates rather than the modern XLSX format.
Does that letter X really make a difference?
It's a massive, crucial distinction in software engineering. The old XLS format was built on a 16-bit architecture, which means it has a hard physical limitation of exactly 65,536 rows per sheet.
And the modern one.
The modern format can handle over 1 million rows. Furthermore, because each individual COVID test result generated several rows of distinct data, each XLS template could only physically accommodate about 1,400 individual cases before it hit that 65,000 row ceiling.
So what exactly happened when case number 1,401 came through the automated pipeline? Did the system crash? Did massive red error alerts pop up on a monitor somewhere? Did alarms go off in the IT department?
No. And that is the most terrifying, insidious nature of this architectural failure. There were no alarms.
None.
None. When the 16-bit physical limit was reached, the automated software simply continued to run, but it silently dropped all the remaining cases off the bottom of the spreadsheet into the void.
It just threw them away.
The data was truncated without a single warning or error log. The system said, "I'm full," and just threw the rest of the pandemic data in the trash. An academic paper published later analyzed the fallout and estimated that because those 16,000 individuals weren't contact traced in time, it resulted in at least 1,500 unnecessary preventable deaths.
That is absolutely chilling. It elevates the conversation entirely. It's not just about a quarterly revenue miss. It is about human lives being lost because of a 16-bit row limit.
It highlights the real-world danger of these structural limits.
And if we bring the mechanics of this failure back to the sales ops listener, obviously, the life and death stakes are entirely different,
Right.
but the architectural failure of the software is exactly the same. Let's hypothesize a scenario.
Let's do it.
What happens when your global marketing team passes data to your sales ops team and your master lead routing spreadsheet hits a silent capacity limit? You could have thousands of highly qualified, high-value prospects generated from a $1 million ad campaign, and they just silently drop off the bottom of the sheet.
They vanish into the digital ether.
Exactly. They vanish because of a hard-coded row limit that you didn't even know existed.
And the worst part is no one in the organization knows it happened until 3 weeks later when the sales reps start angrily complaining to their managers that their pipelines are completely empty and marketing is screaming that they delivered the leads. The trust between departments is shattered over a technical truncation.
Exactly. Now let's look at the next systemic vulnerability of the Frankensheet: formatting and automation ghosts. Excel tries to be an incredibly helpful piece of software by anticipating what data you were trying to input, but sometimes its aggressive helpfulness is actively destructive.
The global scientific community has literally been battling Excel's helpfulness for over a decade. A comprehensive study screened tens of thousands of supplementary Excel data files attached to published peer-reviewed genetics papers. They found persistent structural gene name errors in about 20% of all the files they analyzed.
I need a quick explanation on this. What is a gene name error, and how does a spreadsheet cause it?
Let's look at the mechanics. There is a specific human gene called MARCH1, MARCH1, membrane-associated ring CH type finger 1. It is a critical component of human DNA. But when a genetic research scientist types the alphanumeric string RCH1 into an Excel cell, the software's internal logic kicks in.
What does logic do?
Excel is programmed to aggressively look for dates to help accountants and planners. So it sees RCH1, assumes the scientist meant a date, and automatically, irreversibly converts the text string into the serialized date format for March 1st.
Oh my gosh, it just overwrites the human genome with a calendar date.
Yes. And here's the technical catch. Once Excel converts a string to a serialized date format internally, it is incredibly difficult to revert it back to the original text accurately, especially when you are dealing with a massive data set containing millions of rows of genomic data.
That sounds like a nightmare for researchers.
It was so bad that this aggressive auto-formatting caused massive persistent data corruption in global peer-reviewed research. The International Scientific Committee responsible for naming genes literally gave up fighting the software. They officially changed the names of several human genes entirely to avoid the formatting trigger.
Wait, they literally renamed human DNA because Microsoft Excel kept auto-formatting it?
Yes. They altered the nomenclature of human biology to accommodate the aggressive helpfulness of a spreadsheet application.
That is the absolute peak definition of a Frankensheet. And it's not just genetic scientists dealing with this. The UK's MI5 intelligence agency had an incredibly severe formatting disaster.
Right. MI5 was forced to admit that they wrongly collected highly sensitive subscriber telephone data on 134 completely innocent citizens.
How does that happen? Was it a typo in a warrant?
No, it was a data type mismatch. MI5 analysts were using a spreadsheet to compile a list of specific suspect telephone numbers to apply for surveillance warrants. But they didn't format the cells as text.
So what did Excel think the numbers were?
Because telephone numbers are long strings of digits, Excel treated them as massive numerical values. And when a number gets too large in Excel, the software applies a floating point math rule and automatically converts the number into scientific notation to save space on the screen.
Just to make it fit in the column.
Exactly. In doing so, it rounded the last 3 digits of these suspect phone numbers to 000.
Because it treated a unique identifier as an infinitely divisible number rather than a rigid text string.
Precisely. It swapped the last 3 digits of a suspect's phone number with zeros, creating an entirely new active phone number that belonged to an innocent civilian. The agency submitted the corrupted list, got the warrants, and illegally spied on 134 innocent citizens.
Not because of a grand, malicious government conspiracy, but because of a floating point rounding rule in a spreadsheet cell.
Exactly. If we translate that risk to a sales ops team, it is incredibly prevalent. You are constantly importing complex CRM account IDs, international phone numbers, or specialized tax codes. If you don't explicitly format the column as text, Excel's auto-formatting will aggressively try to help.
It'll just chop off the zeros.
It will strip the leading zeros off a zip code or an account ID. You think you are updating the billing address for account 0010001, but Excel silently dropped the leading zeros, treated it as the number 10,001, and now you are overwriting the critical data of a completely different enterprise customer.
The database is corrupted, and you have no idea until the wrong customer gets the bill.
And that leads us to the final and perhaps the most critical existential vulnerability for enterprise operations: security and hidden data.
I really want to spend time on this because I am trying to picture how this actually works. As a user, if I am working in a sensitive spreadsheet, say, a master file containing everybody's compensation data, and I hide the column with the salary numbers, I assume it's secure.
That's what everyone thinks.
Right. It is visually gone from the screen. If I print the sheet to a PDF, the column doesn't show up. It feels entirely secure. But our sources make it abundantly clear that for an enterprise, hidden in Excel is a massive, dangerous illusion.
It is entirely an illusion, and relying on it is a critical security failure. We have to understand the architecture of the file itself. Hiding a row or a column in Excel does not remove the data from the file. It merely changes the visual display setting in the user interface.
It just changes what you see on the monitor.
Yes. The actual data is still fully present in the file's underlying XML code. It can be unhidden by anyone who receives the file with 2 simple clicks of a mouse, or it can be instantly extracted by running a very basic script against the file. Let's look at the Boeing data breach to see how this plays out in reality.
What happened to Boeing?
A Boeing employee, presumably acting with the best of intentions, wanted to help his spouse with the complex formatting issues she was having. So he emailed her a spreadsheet template he used at work. He believed he was sending a completely safe blank template because all of the sensitive corporate data was located in columns that he had visually hidden.
Oh no. The data traveled with the template.
Yes. Those hidden columns contained the highly sensitive personal information, including the social security numbers and dates of birth of 36,000 Boeing employees. By emailing what he thought was a blank grid, he inadvertently triggered a massive corporate data breach because he didn't understand the difference between visual formatting and data destruction.
And we saw this exact same illusion of security completely derail a high-profile federal trial, too.
Yeah. Oh, the Proud Boys trial.
Yes. During the U.S. Justice Department's prosecution of the Proud Boys, the federal prosecutors were ordered to hand over certain communications to the defense attorneys in a spreadsheet. They filtered out dozens of classified internal DOJ messages from the spreadsheet before handing the file over.
They filtered them but didn't delete them.
Exactly. They didn't delete the data. They just used the filter tool to hide the rows from view.
A catastrophic misunderstanding of the software.
Total disaster. The defense counsel opened the file, instantly saw that rows were skipped, cleared the filter, unhid the rows, and suddenly they had access to highly classified internal DOJ communications. They started aggressively grilling the witness about these classified messages in open court. The prosecutors were stunned, the judge had to intervene, and it completely derailed a massive federal trial.
But perhaps the most severe, life-threatening example of this hidden data illusion involves the Police Service of Northern Ireland, or the PSNI. They responded to a completely routine Freedom of Information request regarding staffing numbers by publishing a spreadsheet online for the public to view.
Okay. A standard FOI request. Provide the total headcount numbers.
Right. They provided a simple sheet with aggregate numbers, but what the staff didn't realize was that the spreadsheet contained a hidden pivot table cache.
A pivot cache.
We need to explain the mechanics of a pivot table here.
Wow.
When you build a pivot table in Excel to summarize data, Excel doesn't just look at the source data. It actually creates a hidden, compressed copy of all that raw source data and stores it inside the file's architecture.
Oh, I had no idea it made a whole copy.
It does. This is called the pivot cache. It is designed to make the pivot table run faster. And if a user simply double-clicks on any summary number inside a pivot table...
Oh, yeah. We have all done this. You are clicking around a spreadsheet, you accidentally double-click a number in a pivot table, and suddenly a brand new green tab pops up at the bottom of your screen filled with rows of data.
Exactly.
Usually it's just annoying, and you right-click and delete the tab.
Exactly. It happens instantly. But in this case, the public downloaded the spreadsheet and someone accessed that hidden cache. And that underlying raw data wasn't just headcount numbers. It was a complete, unfiltered HR system download.
Oh, man.
It contained the full names, ranks, specific job roles, and precise office locations of 10,799 serving police officers and civilian staff.
Oh, my God.
It exposed the specific identities of covert intelligence operatives and civilian staff working directly with MI5 to combat terrorism. It was publicly described by security experts as an absolute gold mine for terrorist organizations.
That is horrifying.
Police officers literally had to start checking under their cars for explosive devices again before driving their children to school. The financial penalties, the emergency security relocations, and the compensation payouts alone are estimated to cost the government hundreds of millions of pounds.
All because an operator didn't understand that a pivot table secretly holds onto the raw data, and they posted it to the internet. If you are sitting in sales operations right now, you handle some of the absolute most sensitive, confidential data in the entire company.
Without a doubt.
You are managing executive compensation structures, highly confidential territory revenues, performance improvement plans, and strategic M&A targeting lists. If you are emailing spreadsheets around the company with hidden tabs, filtered rows, or active pivot tables, you are fundamentally compromising the security of your company's most guarded secrets.
And that profound risk leads us to the critical, actionable turning point of this deep dive. Given these massive, documented financial, operational, and physical security risks, how do organizations actually stop running their core operations on Excel?
Because we have to be realistic here. We know we cannot just ban the application entirely. The goal of a modern IT department is not to uninstall Microsoft Excel from every laptop,
No, of course not.
right? Because if you uninstalled Excel tomorrow, the entire finance department would literally riot in the parking lot. The business would stop functioning.
Exactly. Excel is a brilliant application for its intended use case. The goal is not elimination. The goal is transformation. Organizations must move their operations from a guessing engine built on localized files to a governed architecture.
Okay, what does that look like?
Our sources from MitraTech and RiskConnect outline a very specific structural framework for what good enterprise data actually looks like.
They introduced something called the SBOT framework,
Okay.
the single point of truth. I want to debate this framework because implementing it sounds incredibly difficult.
It is difficult, but it is necessary for survival. The SBOT framework is built on 4 non-negotiable foundational pillars. The first pillar is systems own the data.
Meaning, the multi-million-dollar CRM, the central ERP, or the secure, encrypted cloud database must be the undisputed canonical source of truth for the entire company.
Not a spreadsheet sitting on Gary's local desktop folder labeled final_V4.
Precisely. If a revenue number or a customer record is not physically housed in the official audited system, it legally and operationally does not exist, period. The second pillar of the framework is pipelines move data.
Okay, wait. The source says no manual copy and pasting? How is that even physically possible in a modern office? You are telling me a sales ops manager is never allowed to highlight and copy a row of data ever again. In a governed production environment, yes, that is exactly what it means. Workflows and data transfers must be completely automated through official APIs, application programming interfaces, or secure engineered data integrations.
So machines talk to machines.
Exactly. The underlying philosophy here is that the moment a human being manually copies data from one system onto their clipboard and pastes it into another system, you have introduced fatal, unquantifiable risk into your architecture.
You open the door to the Transalta sorting disaster or the JP Morgan mathematical error.
Machines must move the data, not human clipboards.
That requires a massive investment in IT integration. Which brings us to the third pillar, centralized logic.
Business logic is the brain of your company. It dictates how you calculate a complex commission tier, how you weight a pipeline based on historical close rates, or how you define an active versus churned customer.
And where should that logic live?
That logic must be defined exactly once, it must be coded into the central system, and it must be entirely transparent to auditors.
It absolutely cannot live inside a deeply nested IF statement buried inside a hidden cell on a spreadsheet that only the spreadsheet whisperer understands. Because if that person leaves, the logic vanishes with them.
Exactly. The logic must survive the departure of any single employee. Which brings us to the fourth pillar. And I think this is the most realistic and crucial one for maintaining employee sanity. Controlled extension.
I like this one because it acknowledges human nature. Users will always need to explore the data, ask weird new questions, and do ad hoc exploratory analysis. You can't just lock them in a read-only dashboard prison.
You cannot stifle curiosity, but instead of letting them export a massive CSV file into the completely unmanaged Wild West of local spreadsheets where the data can be mutated and forwarded, you must provide them with governed, secure environments.
Like what? What are the alternatives?
If a sales ops analyst needs to dig deep into a new market trend, give them access to a secure business intelligence tool, provide them with read-only SQL access to query the database directly, or set up governed Python notebooks.
So they get a sandbox.
You give them a secure sandbox where they can slice, dice, and analyze the data to their heart's content without ever permanently altering the underlying source of truth or creating untraceable shadow systems that leak via email.
So if we synthesize all of this, the leadership failures, the catastrophic errors, the structural vulnerabilities of the software in the SBOT framework, and we bring it all the way back home to the listener sitting in their sales ops role. What does a mature strategic sales ops leader actually need to do tomorrow morning when they log in?
A mature sales ops leader must fundamentally shift their mindset. You are no longer just a spreadsheet builder. You must act as a strategic risk manager for the revenue engine.
Okay, where do they start?
The very first step is to run a comprehensive, honest audit of your department. You need to map out your processes and identify the critical Frankensheets that are currently secretly holding your revenue operations together. You have to assess the true risk of those files.
You have to actively go looking for the temporary wooden planks that are currently holding up the 18-wheelers of your company's revenue.
Yes. And once you find them, you have to enforce strict immediate version control and access rights as a short-term tourniquet. But the real structural work of a leader is managing upwards.
Pushing back on the executives.
You must demand proper infrastructure investments from the C-suite. You cannot accept "we'll budget for it next year" as an answer anymore. You have to clearly, forcefully articulate the severe financial, operational, and security risks of relying on decentralized spreadsheets for enterprise-level operations.
Use the examples we discussed today.
Exactly. You have to make the executive team realize that saying no to a critical software investment is not saving money. It is actively saying yes to massive, unquantifiable operational risk.
And culturally, on your own team, you have to establish an uncompromising hard line. If the data or the calculation did not come directly from the governed system, it is not official, and we will not present it.
That's a tough boundary to hold, but it's vital.
You have to champion the return of Excel to its rightful intended place in the ecosystem. It is a brilliant, unparalleled tool for quick, ad hoc, disposable, back-of-the-napkin analysis. It is not, and never was designed to be, the production data pipeline of a multi-million-dollar global enterprise.
It all comes down to accountability. Relying on spreadsheets to run your core business functions is not an IT inevitability. It is an active choice.
A choice with consequences.
It is a choice that breeds dangerous shadow IT. It breeds massive, untraceable mathematical errors. And it creates profound operational fragility that can wipe out millions of dollars with a single missed minus sign. It is, as we set out to prove at the beginning of this deep dive, a fundamental failure of executive leadership.
It is institutional negligence masked as operational convenience.
That is exactly what it is.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the architecture of disaster, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over. We are currently rushing headlong into the age of artificial intelligence.
AI is everywhere now.
Companies everywhere are desperately plugging highly autonomous AI agents and large language models directly into their internal data systems, asking these bots to make autonomous pricing decisions, to forecast quarterly revenue, and to optimize global sales territories in real time.
It is the absolute frontier of enterprise technology.
But I want you to truly think about this. If those shiny, powerful new AI systems are being fed by an underlying, fragile, completely hidden network of undocumented, error-ridden Frankensheets.
Oh, wow.
If the training data is full of undetected copy-paste mistakes, floating point rounding errors, human genes formatted as calendar dates, and hidden rows of corrupted data, are we really stepping boldly into the future of business intelligence?
Or are we simply giving our AI the power to automate our worst spreadsheet disasters at the speed of light?
That is a genuinely terrifying proposition to consider.
Yeah.
Because if the foundational data architecture is already poisoned by decades of compounding spreadsheet errors, the AI will not fix it.
It will simply execute those historical errors with unprecedented, terrifying efficiency.
So as you head back to your desk or jump onto your next Zoom meeting, I want you to take a long, hard look at your own sales ops tech stack. Look closely at that massive spreadsheet open on your monitor right now. Is it a tool helping you build the future? Or is it a trap waiting to spring? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.